The day was cold, even for King's Landing. A grey wind swept through the Red Keep as the sun dipped behind a blanket of clouds, casting long shadows over the courtyard where swords had clashed just moments ago. Blood stained the cobblestones, not from a peasant's brawl or a planned duel, but from a decision that would change the fate of Westeros. Ned Stark lay on the ground, chest heaving, his sword clattered a few feet away, forgotten. Across from him, Jaime Lannister knelt, wide-eyed, and bleeding but alive. The Kingslayer had been ambushed by rogue gold cloaks, men supposedly sworn to protect the peace, but bought with Lannister gold by someone else entirely. They had aimed to make Jaime's death look like an accident, a street quarrel gone too far. But Ned had seen the deceit. He wasn't supposed to be there. He had only come to speak with Petyr Baelish about Robert's latest hunting trip. Yet when he heard the clash of steel and saw Jaime fighting off 3 cloaked men in a narrow alley, he didn't hesitate. Honor didn't wait for explanations. With the instincts of an old soldier, Ned had drawn his sword and stepped in, taking a blade meant for Jaime through his side. He'd struck down 2 men before collapsing. Jaime had finished the 3rd, but it was Ned's sacrifice that had saved him. Now, the Lord of Winterfell was dying in the arms of his family's greatest rival. "You stupid noble fool," Jaime whispered, pressing down on Ned's wound with trembling hands. "Why?" Ned coughed, blood staining his beard. "Because it was right." Jaime sat there stunned, not from injury, but from something heavier. No one, especially not a Stark, was supposed to save a Lannister, not like this. Not when the air still stank of betrayal, and the realm whispered of treason from every corner. Within the hour, word had spread. Eddard Stark, Hand of the King, had died protecting Jaime Lannister. Whispers turned to roars. The court was shaken. Cersei looked at Jaime with suspicion, her eyes narrow and burning. Robert Baratheon was drunk and furious, unable to understand why his old friend would give his life for a man he loathed. Petyr Baelish simply smiled to himself, plans already forming. Sansa wept until her throat went raw. Arya disappeared for 2 days, returning with bruised knuckles and hollow eyes. Catelyn Stark, upon hearing the news in the Vale, shattered a goblet in her hand before the maester could stop the bleeding. But it was Robb Stark, up in Winterfell, who changed the most. When the Raven arrived, bearing the news of his father's death, Robb didn't cry. He stood on the ramparts, looking out over the snow-covered forests, his jaw clenched. "Father died a lion's death," Theon muttered beside him, "saving the very man who helped destroy him." Robb said nothing, but something in him hardened. Ned's death wasn't just a loss, it was a symbol. A man of honor, crushed between lions and vipers, a man too noble for the world he lived in. Meanwhile, Jaime struggled with something new. Guilt. Real guilt. It gnawed at him every time. He closed his eyes. He had spent his life killing for his family, lying for them, sleeping with his sister, to protect a throne that didn't belong to them. But now a Stark had died for him. Not out of loyalty, not out of fear, just because it was right. Jaime tried to honor that. He offered to escort Ned's body back to Winterfell. Robert agreed, too drunk to care, and Cersei too angry to stop him. The journey north was long and silent. Arya refused to ride with Jaime. Sansa wouldn't speak to anyone at all. Only Septa Mordane muttered prayers each night while the cold wind howled like a grieving wolf. And in the crypts of Winterfell, under the carved stone faces of ancient kings, Ned Stark was laid to rest. But the realm would not rest. Not after this. Not with tensions high, alliances broken, and war creeping ever closer. Honor had died, but the consequences had only just begun. The Stark bannermen gathered like storm clouds over Winterfell, their banners flapping in the northern wind. Robb Stark stood in the great hall, hands clenched behind his back, as lords young and old argued over what should be done. The room buzzed with grief, fury, and suspicion. "He died saving a Lannister," Lord Karstark growled, spitting the name like venom. "We should march south and burn Casterly Rock to the ground." "No," Robb said, his voice sharp, calm. "We are not savages, but we are not sheep either. My father's death will not go unanswered." Maester Luwin tried to reason with him later in private. "War is not a game of vengeance, Robb. If you march now, it will be blood and fire. Your sisters are still in King's Landing." "I know," Robb said coldly, "and they will be used as shields the moment swords are drawn. But I will not let the Lannisters dance on my father's grave while pretending to mourn." Meanwhile, in King's Landing, Jaime Lannister walked through the halls of the Red Keep with a silence that unsettled even the guards. He no longer smirked, no longer quipped. He wore black every day, as if in mourning not just for Ned Stark, but for the man he had once been. And though he never admitted it out loud, Jaime felt changed. Cersei noticed, of course. Her fury simmered beneath her golden hair, eyes flashing with suspicion. "You defend him in the council," she hissed at Jaime behind closed doors. "You speak of his honor like it meant something." "He died for me, Cersei," Jaime said, eyes locked on hers, "and I didn't deserve it." "That's the point," she snapped. "He didn't deserve to die for you, and now you want to kneel before his corpse like a broken dog." "You never understood honor," Jaime whispered, turning away. It was the first time he ever made her feel small. She didn't forget it. In the shadows of the capital, Peter Baelish and Varys moved their pieces. The chaos Ned left behind was ripe for manipulation. "The boy in Winterfell will move," Varys murmured in the small council chamber, "and if he does, the North may rise with him." Baelish only smiled. "Let the wolves come. It makes the game more interesting." But the most dangerous storm was growing not in the halls of kings or the courts of spies, but in the heart of Arya Stark. She trained in silence behind locked doors. Syrio Forel was gone, vanished without a trace after the attack on the Tower of the Hand, but his lessons lived in her bones. The blade she carried was small, but her rage was enormous. She blamed Jaime. She blamed Cersei. She blamed every man, who smiled as her father's body was carted north like an afterthought. But most of all, she blamed herself for being too small to stop any of it. Sansa, on the other hand, became even more fragile, like glass that looked pretty but cracked with each passing day. Joffrey mocked her mourning, and the court treated her like a ghost. Her dreams of being queen had become nightmares of empty thrones and blood-drenched floors. And yet, deep in the Red Keep, an unexpected alliance began to form. Jaime Lannister approached Sansa one evening in the Godswood, where she had gone to weep in private. She flinched at his approach, eyes wide, with fear and hatred. "I'm sorry," Jaime said quietly. "He should never have died." "You stood there," she whispered. "You lived. He didn't." "I know," he said, "and I'll carry that longer than you'll carry your grief." For the first time, someone treated her like more than a prisoner. Not with pity, but with guilt, and it stirred something inside her. Confusion, curiosity, hate, yes, but mixed with something else. In the north, the drums of war grew louder. Robb sent ravens to the Tullys, to the Arryns, even a secret one to Stannis Baratheon, though he told no one. The boy who played with swords in the yard was gone. In his place was a young wolf, his father's blood boiling in his veins. "If the realm wants war," Robb said to his bannermen, "then we'll give them the fury of the north." And far to the east, across the narrow sea, a girl with silver hair and dragons in her dreams heard whispers on the wind. "The wolf is howling, the lion is bleeding." Change was coming, and it had begun with a single choice, Ned Stark's last act of honor. Robb Stark crossed the neck with 20,000 men, their boots pounding the ancient stones of the King's Road. Banners of House Stark, Umber, Karstark, and Mormont flew high above the marching army, wolves on grey fields snarling toward the south. But Robb's heart wasn't filled with pride. It was filled with silence. He had buried his boyhood with his father, and now every decision he made weighed more than steel. At Moat Cailin he paused, summoning his war council. Great Jon Umber roared for blood. Rickard Karstark still spoke of vengeance, but it was Lady Mage Mormont who voiced what others feared to say. "Your sisters are still in the lion's den. Do we gamble their lives for justice?" Robb stood still. His voice was measured. "Justice is why I march, and if we wait they'll die anyway, piece by piece inside those walls." He looked to Theon Greyjoy then, a childhood friend who had become more uncertain by the day. "Ride to Pike. Speak to your father. Tell him I need ships if Balon Greyjoy wants to matter again. Now is his chance." Theon grinned, but something flickered in his eyes, something Robb missed. The North was strong, but trust was brittle. Back in King's Landing, the tides shifted. Sansa sat at Queen Cersei's side, quiet and obedient, but her eyes watched. Everything, Joffrey paraded around like a golden devil, growing crueler each day. He enjoyed making Sansa flinch. He liked hearing her say, "My prince," even when her lips trembled. But she endured. She smiled when she had to, and she listened, especially when courtiers whispered about Robb's army drawing closer by the day. Jaime Lannister kept to himself. The halls of the Red Keep, once his playground, felt like a prison now. He trained alone in the yard, his strikes harder, angrier. He drank less, laughed less. His dreams were haunted by Ned Stark's final breath, and worse, by the growing thought that he might never be free of it. One night, Jaime approached Grand Maester Pycelle in his chambers. "If I were to leave the city," he asked carefully, "what path would I take to avoid being seen?" Pycelle blinked. "The Kingslayer. Running. Maybe I'm just tired of being trapped in a cage of gold." But Pycelle reported the conversation to Cersei by morning. She came to Jaime's chambers that night, her voice low and dangerous. "You want to run from your guilt? From me?" "I want to do something that means something," Jaime muttered. "I want to repay what I owe." "Oh," she hissed, "to a dead Stark, to myself." Cersei slapped him, hard. Then she kissed him, harder. Their love was poison, tangled and toxic. And Jaime, despite everything, couldn't resist. Not yet. Elsewhere in the shadows, Varys moved with grace. He found Arya one night, disguised among the kitchen hands, sneaking a blade beneath her tunic. "You plan to kill someone?" he asked, gentle and knowing. She turned, eyes wild. "I plan to kill everyone." Varys sighed. "And what good is vengeance if it gets you caught before the second name on your list?" Arya didn't trust him, but he offered her something no one else had: an escape. "There is a ship leaving for Braavos in 3 nights. If you want to live long enough to make your list matter, go." Arya said nothing, but she didn't return to her bed that night. By the next morning, she was gone. The wolf had slipped through the bars. As Robb's army drew closer to the Riverlands, word reached Tywin Lannister. He was camped in Harrenhal, already preparing for war. He read the Raven's message slowly, face stone cold. "So the boy comes," he said, tossing the parchment aside. Kevan Lannister frowned. "Do we meet him in the field?" "No," Tywin said. "We let him come. And when he reaches too far, we break him." But even Tywin could feel it. The eve balance was shifting. Jaime was growing distant. Cersei was unstable, and the North was angry. Meanwhile, in Winterfell, Bran dreamed of wolves with burning eyes. In the darkness, he heard whispers of war and fire, of dragons waking far across the sea. But he also heard his father's voice, faint and distant, the price of honor. is everything. The boy woke with a scream, heart pounding, staring into the night. Far away in a land soaked with secrets and power, Daenerys Targaryen looked to the stars and whispered, "Westeros bleeds." And her dragons opened their eyes. The riverlands burned. By the time Robb Stark reached the twins, smoke was already rising from villages loyal to House Tully. Lannister forces under Sir Gregor. Clegane had carved a brutal path across the countryside, slaughtering, burning, leaving corpses as warnings. It wasn't war. It was a message. Come south and you will suffer. But Robb didn't flinch. His grief had become armor, his father's memory a sword in his hand. To cross into the south he had no choice but to deal with Walder Frey, the weasel of the crossing. Lord Frey made them wait. When he finally received them in his cold hall, he was surrounded by daughters, sons, and sullen grandchildren. His voice was thin and sharp. "So the young wolf wants my bridge, and what do I get for my kindness? More dead Freys while you chase your father's shadow?" Robb kept calm. "You get honor, you get justice, and you get a promise." Walder's eyes gleamed. "Promise me one of yours for one of mine. A marriage. I want a queen in my bloodline, boy." Catelyn clenched her jaw. Robb hesitated. Just a moment. "I agree," he said, "when the war is won." The Frey's smile was crooked, but he waved them through. The trap was set, though no one yet knew it. As Robb marched on, Jaime Lannister stood before the Iron Throne, looking up at the seat he once helped destroy. His armor gleamed, but his heart felt tarnished. The court watched him with whispers and cautious glances. They still remembered how Ned Stark died. The king, Joffrey, was getting bolder. He ordered beatings in the yard for minor slights. He executed a baker for delivering burnt bread. When Sansa flinched, he smiled wider, but Jaime no longer laughed. He stood silently behind the boy king, always near but never defending his cruelty. One day he found Sansa alone in the Great Sept, lighting a candle for her father. "You're stronger than you look," he said quietly. She didn't look up. "You're not." That hit him harder than any sword. She stood and walked away, but her words stayed. In the shadows, Varys whispered with Tyrion Lannister, "The wolves are moving. The boy king is drawing enemies faster than flies to blood, and your brother, he is changing." Tyrion nodded. "Let's hope he changes fast enough, or we all die with the realm." Meanwhile, across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen stood. Before the red waste, her people starving, her dragons barely more than lizards, but her spirit was unbroken. She had heard of the death of Eddard Stark, the rumblings of war in Westeros. She saw opportunity. "I will return," she said, "not just to reclaim my throne, but to break the wheel that crushed him." Her dragons chirped and hissed, their eyes golden and wild. Fire stirred in her blood. The Game of Thrones had reached her ears, and she would not be late to it. Back in Westeros, Arya Stark reached Braavos on a salt-stained ship, alone but not afraid. She clutched the small coin Varys had given her, the one bearing the strange face. When she showed it to the captain, he simply nodded. "Valar Morghulis," he said. She didn't understand, not yet. But something in her bones knew. This was the place where names meant everything, and she had many names. In Harrenhal, Tywin Lannister laid out maps over a cracked stone table. His scouts brought news of Robb's victories, small skirmishes won with speed and cunning. The young wolf was no fool, but Tywin was colder than stone. "We will split them, cut the river lords from the north. We'll let the boy win enough, battles to taste glory. Then, when he feels like a king, we'll take his crown and his head." He didn't fear Robb, but he feared what the Stark name could become if left unchecked. What he didn't know was that Robb wasn't fighting just as a Stark anymore. He was fighting as a son who had buried his father under Lannister steel. And he would not rest until the south remembered why winter was feared. The sun was setting red over the fields of the Whispering Wood, and the ground trembled under the march of northern boots. Robb Stark stood at the head of his army, armor dark with blood and sweat, grey wind by his side. The wolves had arrived. Robb's traps had worked. In a stunning reversal, he captured Sir Jaime Lannister during a night assault, his forces slashing through the arrogant Lannister vanguard like knives through silk. For the first time since Ned's death, Robb smiled, not in joy, but in grim satisfaction. He stood over the bound Kingslayer, who was bruised and blooded but not broken. "You came for vengeance," Jaime said, sitting in the mud. "Well, you have me." Robb knelt, meeting Jaime's eyes. "I didn't come for vengeance, I came for justice, but sometimes the difference feels small." Jaime didn't reply. He understood now. The boy in front of him wasn't playing war. He was born for it. Back in King's Landing, the court was unraveling. The news of Jaime's capture struck like lightning. Cersei shattered a goblet against the wall, screaming at everyone and no one. Joffrey's temper flared harder. He ordered Sansa beaten again, this time so badly she had to be carried to her chambers. But Tyrion had had enough. "You lay another hand on her," he told Joffrey in front of the full court, "and you'll have more enemies than friends in this hall." Joffrey sneered, but said nothing. Even a mad king could smell danger in his uncle's tone. Varys watched all of it with patient eyes. "The lions are eating themselves," he whispered to Littlefinger. "And the wolves are at the door," Baelish smirked. But Peter's eyes were also on Sansa now, not as a tool, but as a prize. The game had shifted, and he was already setting the board for the next move. In Braavos, Arya Stark trained with the Faceless Men, shedding her name, her past, her pain, but never her purpose. Her list burned in her heart: Joffrey, Cersei, Ilyn Payne. She whispered them like prayers before sleep. They had taken her father. One day she would return the favor, with silence and steel. And across the sea, Daenerys had entered Korth with dragons on her shoulders and fire in her eyes. She learned to speak with kings and cutthroats alike. Each tale from Westeros made her hungrier. "Ned Stark was a man of honor," she said to Ser Jorah, "and they killed him for it." "Honor doesn't win thrones," Jorah warned. "No," she agreed, "but it inspires armies." In the dungeons of Riverrun, Robb Stark visited Jaime Lannister one final time. "I'll offer a trade," Robb said. "You for my sisters. Clean, no tricks." Jaime gave a bitter laugh. "My family doesn't deal in honor." "I'm not giving you a choice." The next day, ravens flew. Catelyn Stark wept when she heard Arya had vanished, but she saw the fire in her son's eyes. He was no longer asking for peace. He was demanding respect, and the realm was listening. The war raged on. Tywin pushed back with brutal counterattacks, burning the Riverlands with Clegane's terror. The Freys waited, smiling behind thin politeness, biding their time. But in the hearts of the small folk, something new stirred. They whispered the name of the boy who fought for a father who died saving an enemy. "He's not just a lord's son," they said. "He's what a king should be." And in the crypts of Winterfell, beneath stone and shadow, Ned Stark lay still. But the world above him was changing, spinning faster than it ever had. His death had not ended the game. It had only made it honest. He had died for honor. And in doing so, he had awakened a storm, one that would not rest until the lions roared no more and the wolves reclaimed the north.